I'm Debbie, and welcome to Book and Bujo, where I talk about all things books, bullet journals, and stationery. Today is my long overdue May and June wrap-up. To make this as quick and easy and efficient as possible, I'm just going to go through a quick overview of my stats from May, and then I'll go through each book as I read them for May, and then I will do the same for June, and then we will be done and awaiting my next video, which will most likely be another haul because I did take advantage of Prime Days and I got a couple gifts. So without any further ado, let's start with the stats for May. In May, I read 26 books. Not sure how I did it. I'm pretty sure it was only because a lot of them were very small, very short. And I read 7,899 pages. Again, not sure how I did that. Yeah, interesting. Makes me hopeful for my August TBR. And a little nervous for how September's gonna go, because I've had quite a few months of a lot of books, so we'll see how it goes. So 7,899 pages, rounded, averaged out to about 304 pages per book. So not too bad. I listened to 195.96 hours, so basically 196 hours of audiobooks, which averaged to about 8 hours per book. For my star ratings, not too bad. I had 2 3.5 star books, 14 4-star, 8 4.5 books, and 1 5-star, which wasn't a reread. So I already knew that I was going to give it 5 stars because I gave it 5 stars before. 15 of the books I did get from the library. I did own 10 of the books and 1 gifted book, which was actually a giveaway that I won. And I will tell you which one that was when we get to the books that I read. My average rating was 4.2. For genres, I read 2 classics, 18 fantasy, big shocker there, 1 mystery, 1 nonfiction, 1 romance, and 2 sci-fi. My shortest book was 32 pages, and that was Where's My Cow by Terry Pratchett. It was also my shortest audiobook at 6 minutes. The longest book I read was The Prophet Evie Dan by Philip Chase, which was 713 pages. The longest book that I listened to was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and that was 21.38 hours. How I read 3 graphic novels, 5 novellas, and 18 novels, which helps me to understand how I went through so many books. I did read 14 traditionally published books, 8 self-published, and 4 indies. For demographics or audience, I read 15 adult, 1 new adult, 8 YA, 1 middle grade, and 1 children's book. I got something from every category. So I did read 14 new to me authors and 12 authors that I have read from before. I did listen to 3 audiobooks. I read 7 ebooks and 3 physical books, and then 12 books that were mixed media, so either physical and audio or ebook and audio. I read books that went from the 1800s all the way up to 2023. And I also read a fairly even amount of books with different color covers. Though I think I need to find some more books with pink or purple covers, because that seems to be pretty lacking in my cover color category. I did read 25 fiction books and only 1 nonfiction book this month. Series. I started 9 series in May. Of course I did. I did continue 8 series though, and I completed 1, so that's good. Fairly even amount. Continuation completion together is 9 and starting is 9, so maybe they cross each other out. So last part of my stats are my favorites. So my favorite character is Moist von Lipwig from Going Postal by Terry Pratchett, which is the 33rd book in the Discworld series, and his character is hilarious. So much fun. Love that character. I hope we see him again in some future books. My favorite author for this month was Sebastian de Castell, and my favorite book series that I started, well, just my favorite book series I think that I read that wasn't a reread, was The Scorched Earth by Veronica G. Henry. It's very interesting. It's sci-fi fantasy with this nature component. It was very interesting. So The Canopy Keepers is the first book in the series. Definitely enjoyed it and am intrigued enough to move on to the second book. And the cover is stunning. My favorite movie for May is kind of a tie. So we watched Air, which is the movie about Nike and Michael Jordan, how Air Jordans came to be. It was done so well, and of course from a girl from the 80s loves a movie that is based in the 80s. The music was amazing and there was so much nostalgia wrapped up in it, and yeah, but it was very well done. And Ben Affleck and Matt Damon did a great job. So that was kind of more of a feel-good movie, and just a hilarious action movie is Dungeons and Dragons with Chris Pine. Oh my gosh. That was so cute. We had so much fun watching that one. Laughing out loud, most definitely. And then favorite TV series was The Good Place, and that's Ted Danson and Kristen Bell. It was really good. We finished the series in May and thoroughly enjoyed it. My favorite YouTuber for May, I definitely watched a lot of Jashi Curran, and I will leave her channel linked down below for you because she is amazing. She does a lot with goal planning and journaling, bullet journaling, and she has a vlog as well, which is super fun, and she is just great. She is an amazing teacher and just person in general. All right, enough with the stats. Let's go ahead and move on to the books themselves. So I'm going to rattle these off in order of how I read them. So the first book I read all the way to the last book that I read. And the first one was Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.5 stars, very immersive and atmospheric. And it is a Rumpelstiltskin style retelling. Next up was An Unkindness of Ghost by Rivers Solomon, and again, this was very enjoyable. I gave it 4 stars. This is a sci-fi dystopian book. And then we had Bride by Ali Hazelwood, and I also gave this one 4 stars. I thought it was quite entertaining and a great guilty pleasure read. Fourth book I read was Going Postal by Terry Pratchett, the 33rd book in the Discworld series, and the wonderful character of Moist von Lipwig, who has had an interesting start at the beginning of the book, and then gets kind of a second chance and becomes the new general postmaster of the post office in Ankh-Morpork. And I gave that one 4.5 stars. Next up was Wuthering Heights, the graphic novel, and the original story is by Emily Bronte, and it was adapted by Jim Pipe and illustrated by Mark Spender, and they did a really good job. I think it's a great refresher if you want to refresh yourself on the story. I think this is great for it. If you don't really want to read a classic but you want to know what everybody's talking about, this works too. It doesn't go into quite the depths of the story that the actual novel does, but it even gives you like a cast of characters, and it's in this nice color format. But it is super fun, and it gives the basic story without getting into angst and the depth of emotion that the original story brings out. It doesn't quite go that deep into it, but overall I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. Book number 6 was 1984 by George Orwell. My sister very highly recommended this to me. She said, ditch one of your top 12 classics you want to read this year and put that one in there instead. So I took her advice, and that's what I did, and I definitely enjoyed it. Now I know what everybody's talking about. It was very good. I did give it 4.5 stars. Well written, and you really get immersed into that story and that time period. Like most people say, he was way ahead of his time. Next up was Fourth Wing, the first book in the Imperium series by Rebecca Yarros, and I did really enjoy it. I thought it was typical YA, angsty, love triangle, underdog, all the tropes in there, but it was entertaining and enjoyable, and I did thoroughly enjoy it, and I gave it 4 stars. Book number 8 was a feel-good read, and this one was, I would call it a middle grade story, and that was Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too by Jomny Sun, and this was just adorable. This was one of the graphic novels that I read, and it was 256 pages, so that helped me get my page count up, but I read it in like just a couple hours. It was like super quick and easy read because there's a lot of pictures and not a lot of words on the page, but it was so beautiful. Number 9 was another 4.5 star, and that was A Thud by Terry Pratchett, the 34th book in the Discworld series. And it was great to have Commander Vimes back in action in this one. Book number 10 was Every Hearted Doorway by Seanan McGuire, and this is the first book in the Wayward Children series, and I gave this one 4 stars. Gotta love a portal fantasy. Book 11 was the 34th and a half book in the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett, and that is Where's My Cow? So this is one that you read after you read Thud, because it is mentioned in Thud, and then you would read this one afterwards, and it's basically just a children's story that is told to one of the children in the book, and it is adorable. Next up, I read Spellslinger by Sebastian de Castell. This is the first book in the Spellslinger series, and I cannot wait to get to the next book and see what's going to happen to our main characters, because this was definitely entertaining read and I thoroughly enjoyed all the characters, and I am looking forward to what happens next. And this one did get 4.5 stars. Next up was another 4.5 star book, and that was All of Our Demise, which is the second book in the All of Us Villains series by Amanda Foody and Catherine Lynn Herman. And this is just a duology, so this was my completed series that I read this month. I enjoyed it. I love the atmosphere of the book. The characters are interesting. Not all of them are ones that are going to stick in my brain forever, but I thoroughly enjoyed it while I was reading it, and it was a great time. Book number 14 of the month of May was Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday, and this was actually to be read as a standalone, and I was like, oh, it's nonfiction, so it's a standalone. And then I realized that no, this isn't a standalone. It's part of a 4-book series of the Stoic series. So, yeah, I read enough other standalones that I read enough books to fit this prompt. I'm just going to keep it where it is. So, but yeah, Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday, and I love the Stoic Virtues series. I've read, this is the second one I've read. I think Courage is Calling is the other one I read, and The Right Thing Right Now is his newest book that just came out. I have not read that one. They're all very good, all about the Stoics philosophy, and this one is particularly about discipline itself, and I love Ryan's writing, and they are always a pleasure to read, and I always learn something. I did give 4.5 stars. Next up was The Princess Bride by William Goldman, also 4.5 stars. This one was super fun. I loved how it kind of went back and forth in different areas. So we're in the author's time, we're in the father and the son time, and then we're in the story time. So going in between those was really fun, but I was so confused at the beginning. An annotation of the abridged version of the book. So I'm like, well, I don't want the abridged, I want the full book, the unabridged version. And so I was looking around and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, it's part of the story. So he totally had me fooled. I was looking around going, where's the story by this actual dude? Yeah, no, it's not. Sorry if that's a spoiler, but yeah, to save you a little time, this is the original story. You don't need to go and try and find this fictional author of a story that doesn't exist. So, The Princess Bride. It was very long. Some of the story of the author's time probably could have been reduced a little bit, and it would have, I don't think it would have affected or detracted from the story itself at all, but it was still fun and enjoyable. Some of the little short stories that come with it, I did actually DNF. They were okay, but not enough to spend that much more time reading all of them. I think I read 3 of the 4, and like the Princess Baby, and I can't even remember what they all were. They were okay, but don't waste time. Just read the main story and you'll be good. Next up was the giveaway book that I won. So I did enter a giveaway on Storygraph, and I won The Origins of a Guildmaster by A.M. Eno. It's a Thalmorian Legends novella. So I'm not sure if there's going to be other books in Thalmorian Legends, or if this is just a standalone and that's just part of the name of the story. But I did really enjoy this. It was fairly short, but I would totally read more in this world, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I felt myself immersed in it. I was interested in the characters. I wanted to know what happened to them, and I still want to know what's the next step, what's going to happen next. But we don't know, because this is the only story so far. So I'll have to wait and see if anything else comes out from A.M. Eno, because I am a fan. And I gave this one 4 stars. In my stats, I totally forgot My favorite and least favorite book. My least favorite book at 3.5 stars was Wuthering Heights. So it was good, but not amazing. There wasn't anything like super special about it. It was just average. But my favorite book, after I read it, I did rate this really highly. But now that I've been away from it for a little bit, I don't know if I would have rated it quite as high. Definitely still 4.5 star, but I don't know. Spellslinger may have topped it out thinking back on it later. But I did choose Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson, and this is the first book in the Ernest Cunningham series. It was so enjoyable. I loved all the twists and turns, the mystery of it, and the thrilling aspects. The dynamics between the family members was so believable. All of the characters were interesting, and it was a fun ride. Next up was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, and this is the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy. This one definitely makes you think. So it's kind of a sci-fi, almost want to say dystopian-like series, dystopian-esque series, and it definitely makes you think. It's very interesting. It's kind of complex, and there's a lot of depth and layers to it that I'm not sure if I picked up on all of that going through it the first time. I think this is definitely a book I would want to read at least twice. Probably pick up on a lot more things than I did the first time around. And I gave the 5th season 4 stars. Next up, another 4-star book, and that was The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake. This is the second book in the Atlas series. I'm glad I finally read this one because it was very interesting. I enjoyed it as much as the first one, but I don't think it was quite at the same level the first one was. I would have liked a little bit more overall, I think, not just from the characters, a little bit more from the story. I think there was a little bit more, I guess maybe more interaction. I'm not sure. I just wanted something a little bit more from it to give it that 4.5 or 5-star feel. But I did enjoy it, and I would recommend the series so far. All right, book number 20. The Prophet of Edan by Philip Chase, the second book in the Edan trilogy, and I loved this one. Liked the first book better. I feel like this one suffered a little bit from the second book syndrome, and I think a lot of the other reviewers think the same way. So you have book 1, book 2, and then book 3 is supposed to be even better than the first two. So this one had a lot of journeying. We had some great epic battles going on, a lot of character building and characterization. I think part of it is just the slowness that happens as our main character is by himself and journeying, and there's not as much going on. It's mainly just kind of him in his head, so that makes things feel a little bit slower than they really are. But if you like battles, this one's got you covered. Next up, Last Stand of the Stone Fist by Michael R. Miller, and this is the prequel novella that you actually read it in between the first and the second book, and it has some backstory on a couple of the characters that are in the first book, so it's actually, I feel it's more impactful if you read it after you read the first book instead of reading this one first. I would definitely read Ascendant first and then read this one, and then read Unbound. It makes a lot more sense in that order. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Highly recommend. The whole series is good. Songs of Chaos series, so good. Book number 22 was Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, and this is the first book in the Legends and Lattes series, and it was so cute, so cozy, so warm, so cozy fantasy. I get what everybody's talking about. I loved it. So good. 4.5 stars. I think one of the things I like most about this one is just the community that you build around yourself. It's just beautiful. Next up, I read Midnight Comes by Ellen Hatchell, and this is a prequel to the Midnight series. And this one was definitely interesting. It was a short little novella about an elf and a vampire that fall in love and have a child and are ostracized from their respective races because how dare you fall in love with an elf? How dare you fall in love with a vampire? And then there's actually a little mystery in there as well, which is kind of fun. And I definitely want to check out more of Ellen Hatchell's work. 4 stars. Next up, I read The Picture of Dorian Gray, originally by Oscar Wilde, and this is adapted by Ian Eddington and illustrated by Ian J. Colbard. This was a lot of fun. This definitely captures the whole theme of the book and everything about the book in graphic novel form, which is so much fun. This one is in black and white. I mean, it doesn't go as in depth as the book, of course, because it's a graphic novel, but it was definitely fun. It gives the gist of the story, and of course another good refresher if you haven't read it in a while and you want to just give it another quick read. This is a good one for that. But of course it does not replace the original book, which, again, the strength of emotion that you feel towards these characters, especially the main character in the actual book compared to this one, yeah, it's much stronger in the actual book than in the graphic novel form, but I still really enjoyed it. 4 stars. Book number 25, the last 4-star book of the month, and that was The Canopy Keepers by Veronica G. Henry, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. It's a sci-fi fantasy that has nature elements to it, so you have creatures that are part of the tree and part of just the ecosystem and Mother Earth, and then you have, you know, the humans living above, just trashing on the earth and not taking care of it, and these creatures want to take care of it and are, I don't want to give away any spoilers, so I won't go any further than that, but we also have a brother and sister who are out with their family and camping, and a fire happens, and the 2 kids are away from the little campsite where the parents are, and this story basically follows the brother and sister as they grow into adulthood and the different paths they take and the different choices that they make. But this was really good. It's kind of you got some found family in there, and beautiful cover, especially if you can find the color version. Beautiful. And then last but not least, my only 5-star read for the month, and also my only reread, and that was The Exile by Ryan Cahill. And actually, I think I gave this a 4.5 star the first time I read it, and definitely a 5-star on the reread, because I've been rereading the entire series, and I think just this character, we follow Dane in this story, and I think just reading through the other books following up to this one, for the second time, I got it a little bit more, I think, and I enjoyed it even more on the reread. So I would highly recommend The Bound and the Broken series by Ryan Cahill. This is book 2.5, so it comes after Of Darkness and Light and before Of War and Ruin, which is on my TBR for August. So that wraps up my May TBR, so let's head on over to June. June stats. I read 16 books, so 10 less than I did in May, but I read 7,032 pages. I mean, that's still a little over 800 less than I did in May as well. That is an average of 439 pages a day as opposed to 303 pages from May. So I did overall read more pages per book, and an average of about 13 hours a day. I checked my math a couple times, and that seemed right, of audiobooks. I mean, I did listen to a lot of audiobooks in June, and it was a total of 216 hours, 216 and a half hours of audiobooks. Now, of course, not all of the books I read were audiobook, just as a nice even average. I had 2 3.5-star books, 2 4-star books, 10 4.5-star books, and 2 5-star books, neither of which were a reread, so that's good. Shortest book I read was Empress of Assault and Fortune by Ning Vo, and that was 119 pages. And the shortest audiobook I listened to was just under 5 hours, and that was Spell Over Troubled Waters by Renee George. The longest book I read was 794 pages, and that was Magefall by David Estes. And that was also the longest audiobook I listened to at just under 33.5 hours. I read 1 classic and 10 fantasy, 2 nonfiction, 1 paranormal, 1 romance, and 1 sci-fi. So I did read 14 fiction and 2 nonfiction books in June. 15 novels and only 1 novella. And I read 10 authors that I've read from before and 6 that were new to me, which also means I am hopefully continuing and completing more series since they are returning authors. 1 audiobook, 3 ebooks, 1 physical book, and 11 mixed media, so some combination of audio and physical or audio and digital. I read 9 traditional books, 4 indie, and 3 self-pub. I like that they're evening out a little bit more now. 7 to 9, so not too bad for indie and self-pub versus traditional. 10 of the books were from my library, and 6 of them I owned, which is a good reading down my owned TBR, which there are a lot on my Kindle. I don't even want to look and see how many Kindle books I have that I haven't read yet. And again, from the 1800s all the way to 2024 for publication dates, a whole gamut in between. And I did find a pink book for June. No purple, but I did have at least one pink book that I read. Series. So I did read 3 standalones. I started 4 series. Not too bad, better than May. I continued 7 series and I completed 2. So that is really good. I like continuing of the 7 series, so that means I'm getting even closer to completing a lot more. I almost forgot my demographics. I read 10 adult books, 1 new adult, and 5 YA. So my favorites. So favorite characters. I can't use the one I used from last month just because I like having new characters each time, but Moist von Lipwig did make another appearance, so yes, loved him. But I am gonna pick Marion Holcomb from The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. I thought that character was done really well. She was an interesting character. I liked her. Favorite author is kind of a toss-up between David Estes and the Kingfall History series with Magefall and The Woman in White with Wilkie Collins. Even though it's a classic, I really enjoyed his writing style. It was very interesting and I thoroughly enjoyed the book, which, I mean, it's a chunker, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. My favorite series is probably, it was hard because I had a lot of good series this month, but I would have to choose The Age of Madness by Joe Abercrombie. Very good series. The YouTuber I've been watching quite a bit in June was Clark Kegley, and he does a lot of kind of self-help journaling type videos, and he's in Scottsdale, so another Arizonan, which I love, but he's very interesting and he's got a great take on things, and he's easy to listen to and easy to learn from, which I appreciate. Isn't afraid to dumb things down a little bit for you without sounding condescending at all, so breaks it down enough to where it's easy to understand without making it feel like he's talking down to you, which is nice. I appreciate that. All right, on to the books. And again, from the first book I read to the last book that I read. First book was Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and this one was one of the 2 nonfiction books that I read this month, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was entertaining. I learned something, and I'm glad I read it. Next up was another nonfiction, and that was How I Became the Fittest Woman on Earth by Tia Claire Toomey, and I loved this book. I thought it was so interesting, it was inspiring, and it was just nice to hear her story from where she started until where she is now. 4.5 stars. Book 3 is Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare, and I always say this series wrong, so let me look and double check. And this is the first book in the Chronicles of the Castellone series. And I thought it was intriguing. I enjoyed it. The characters were interesting. I did give it 5.5 star. It definitely wasn't a 5-star read for me. I mean, there's some issues here or there, and there's times when you wanted a little bit more and times you wanted a little bit less. So it could have been fleshed out a little bit more, I think. But overall, I thought it was enjoyable, and I am looking forward to reading to the next book in the series. So the next book I read was The Stones of Earth and Air by V.M. Sang, and this is the first book in the Elemental World series, and it was very cute. Definitely more middle grade YA. It's advertised as YA, but a upper middle grade, so not like 3rd, 4th grade, kind of more, the 5th, 6th, 7th grade area. And I thought it was entertaining. I enjoyed the story. It was a lot of fun, but there was definitely some weirdness to it. So it's The Stones of Earth and Air. The second book is Fire and Water. So it's kind of in 2 parts, each book. So the first book, you go into the Earth section of it. And the second part of the book, you go into the Air section part of it. But in the Air section part of it is talking about the Fire section. And you're like, but the Fire section is in the second book. So I just thought that was an interesting choice. It's like this one really should have been Earth and Fire then, if they were going to the Fire part next. I just thought that was an interesting choice to be like, oh yeah, well, we just returned from getting the fire element, and you're like, wait, what? We didn't get to hear any of that. Like, we didn't see any of that. We didn't know anything of that time period. So, what? So I was a little confused for a while, and then I was just like, whatever, and just went with it and just kept reading the story, and it was fine. But I just thought that was an interesting choice for the author to write it that way. So, kind of interesting. Yeah, so this is kind of a portal fantasy with parallel world type things. And the main character, his best friend, is the prince. And he was actually chosen as the prince's companion. So to have a friend, valet, bodyguard, / whatever else he needs to help him grow up and just have a friend. So something happens with the prince, and this character needs to figure out how to fix it. And so he ends up going through a portal to a parallel world and has to get the stones of earth and the stones of air so that he can help save the prince. And then, of course, the second book is fire and water, which is the other two elements that they need. It was fun, 3.5 stars. Next up is my favorite and 5-star read of the month, and that is Magefall by David Estes, and this is the 3rd book in the Kingfall History series, and I think this is my favorite book so far. I have given them all 5 stars so far. I love them all very much. I really love David Estes as an author. I loved his Fate Mark series, and I loved his Slip series, which is a sci-fi dystopian, and I am loving Kingfall. They are all just a little bit different in style, but they are so good. So the Kingfall Histories series takes place in the same world as the Fate Mark series, so but different continents or different areas of the world. So they're not necessarily, neighbors. You're not going to get a whole lot of the same names or the same characters. And I think this is also a slightly different time period from Fate Marked. I think it's like quite a few years, maybe decades, something like that, after Fate Marked series. And I am just loving the series. There's dragons, there's battles, there's royalty, there's political intrigue, there's backstabbing, there's sneaking around, there's friendships and some heartwarming moments, and just such a good all-around book. And I love how well David Estes can bring you from character to character and different POV to POV without making you confused. And you keep up and you know exactly who is talking, you know where you are, you know what's happening each time he switches POVs, which is amazing, and it's definitely a gift of his. So highly recommend the Kingfall History series. Next up, I read The Lost World by Michael Crichton, which is the 2nd book in the Jurassic Park series, and I also thoroughly enjoyed this one. 4.5 stars, so good. This is kind of a sci-fi fantasy thriller horror. I'm not sure exactly what genres it all fits into. Definitely kind of thriller horror with some mystery and intrigue in there, and I love the character. Again, I love the characters. I love characters just in general. I love how the twists and turns that you get throughout the book, but also in between the 2 books, things that happen at the end that then come to fruition in the beginning of this one, and the expectations and assumptions that you make in between. It's so much fun. Similar, but definitely not the same as the movie in many aspects, like normal. Next up, Wintersmith, the 35th book in the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett, and I believe this is the 3rd book in the Tiffany Aching series. And again, so much fun. This time Tiffany Aching danced with the wrong gentleman at the ball, and stuff happens and gets messed up, and she's got to figure out how to fix it. So much fun. 4.5 stars. And then another favorite author and book series of mine is Grimoires of a Middle-Aged Witch by Renee George, and this one is the 4th book in the series, A Spell Over Troubled Waters. I can't get enough of this book series. It is so much fun. There's so much just nostalgia with it as well, just because of the pop culture references throughout the book, and it's just a lighthearted, fun, and snarky and humorous book series that has a lot of fantasy and magical elements to it and some fun characters. Definitely a book that doesn't take itself too seriously and is sometimes a little over the top, but in a good way. Next up is a series that I completed, which is exciting, and that is The Ship of the Dead, which is the third and final book in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series by Rick Riordan. And again, I love this series. This one I did give 4.5 stars to. The Magnus Chase series overall is probably my least favorite of all of the series, but it's still a 4-star series. Like Percy Jackson is, of course, 5 stars, and yeah, all of those ones. So the Magnus Chase ones are 4 stars to me. They're a step down, and the Trial of Apollo as well I don't connect with as much as I did with the original stories, which doesn't mean they're not good books. They're all really good. I think I just am in a different place in my life now than when I first started reading them, and so I'm just not connecting with them the same as I did with the original series. But yes, thoroughly enjoyed it. Next up was Iron Flame, the second book in the Imperium series by Rebecca Yarros. And I definitely like the first book better, but I did enjoy myself with Iron Flame as well. I like the characters. I am intrigued to find out more. The ending was interesting. Not sure if I would make some of the same choices as some of the main characters in those situations, but that's what makes a good book, is thinking outside of your comfort zone and seeing what decisions other people make. Book number 11, The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Ning Vo, and this is the first book in the Singing Hills series, and I did give this one 3.5 stars. So I enjoyed it, but it took me a while to get into it, which is a little rough because it's only 119 pages. So it's a pretty short book, but it just, I don't know, I just didn't connect with the characters as much as I wanted to. I did enjoy the setting and the storyline. Like, the storyline was good. I don't know, there's just something I didn't connect with. And I think a part of it is definitely prefer books that don't have talking animal type creatures. I've definitely noticed that when there's a lot of talking animals that are the main characters that talk and walk and whatever like humans, I tend not to like those very much, and that's the feel I had with this book, and I think that's why I got 3.5 stars over 4 star, because the storyline, the plot, the characters themselves, their personalities and stuff, I think were done really well. It's just so, it's all me. This is a great book, just the enjoyment level for me was on me because it's just not a style that I prefer. If it's on your TBR, I would definitely recommend reading it because your tastes are probably very different from mine in this type of aspect. Next up, The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This is my other 5-star read for the month, and I loved this book. It was so interesting. It had a very Perry Mason aspect to it. This one gave me kind of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier vibes and Perry Mason vibes. So you have kind of almost that kind of courtroom lawyer digging into stuff and figuring out the mystery kind of thing, vibe to it. And the whole like first half of the book, all I could picture is Perry Mason, and I loved Perry Mason growing up. I just thought it was so fun. It was a great show. So I may be skewed a bit by those nostalgic vibes, but I thought the storyline itself was really interesting. There's some gaslighting and some underhanded things that go on in this book. So there are definitely some trigger warnings, so you may want to check that out before getting into this book. But I love this. It doesn't read like a typical classic, so there's no hard to read wording or phrasing or language in it. I think it's pretty understandable and really easy to read. I would definitely recommend it. I love it. 5 stars. So my next book I put on hold at my library because I found out that I won another giveaway, which was a Goodreads giveaway this time, and it was The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, and I was like, I haven't even read the first book yet. And I'm getting the second book, so I gotta find the first book. And I don't know, I was like a 16 of 20 people on the wait list or something like that, and then all of a sudden, I don't know if other people just dropped out or read it really fast or what happened, but all of a sudden they're like, it's here, come pick it up. And I'm like, okay. And so I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night, the first book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series by Carissa Broadbent, and I definitely enjoyed this one. This one, people are kind of compare it to more of an adult version of A Fourth Wing in a way, and it definitely gives kind of those vibes. You get the whole like Hunger Games style where you have chosen people and they have to battle and the last one out wins. And it's definitely got some dark parts in it. Lots of trigger warnings, but I thought it was written really well. The characters were interesting. There's some great twists and turns, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. 4.5 stars. Apparently, I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the books I read this month. And with an average star rating of 4.4, I think that backs it up. 3 more to go. Unbound by Michael R. Miller. This is the second book in the Songs of Chaos series, and we continue to follow Ash and Holt, and I love this series. It's a coming of age story, and it's just beautiful. There's some great battles in here. The characters are interesting. There's political intrigue as well. There's a plague that's going around. There's just a lot that happens in this book. I'm here for it. I mean, dragons. You gotta love it. Right, the last 2 books for June. Making Money by Terry Pratchett, the 36th book in the Discworld series, and again we follow Moist von Lipwig, and he did such a great job with the post office that now Veterinary has plans for him and the banking system on Morpork. You'll have to read to find out what happens. Great character though, and Veterinary is definitely an interesting character. Not really one of my favorites, but I don't think he's supposed to be. In a way. You're supposed to like love the character by not loving him. If that makes any sense. And then lastly, The Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie. And this is the 3rd and final book in the Age of Madness series, and it's a doozy. It's probably the best book in the whole First Law world. It's very good. Again, like I said earlier, it ends very interestingly. It's a great series. You gotta check out the whole series. Like, I would start with the First Law trilogy and then work your way through the short story collection, through all of the standalones, because they really do have an impact on the final trilogy in the series. And Joe Abercrombie is a great author. He is not afraid to be a little dark, maybe have a little hopelessness in there, but somehow there always seems to be a shining light for someone. Maybe not always the same person in each of the stories, but someone always seems to have a little bit of something good going on. I would highly recommend it. But thank you so much for this very long and very overdue wrap up for my May and June TBRs. Stay tuned for my July wrap up also coming up. And that one may not be quite as bad. I did read 18 books in July. So that one shouldn't be too bad, and I will hopefully have that wrap up for you in the next couple of weeks. So how did your reading go this summer? Did you have a favorite series or a favorite author or just a favorite book in general? I would love to find out what you've been reading. Let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, keep reading. Bye!